What's up, all my folks out in YouTube land? Daryl, also known as the Finisher. Hey, this video, super important. The future of work, y'all. I mean, the future is just kind of like history repeating itself, because really, independent contracting is the future. And how does this affect you? Is that I don't care whether you do a handyman business or not, you need a skill, all right? And we're gonna have to go over the reasons why, because I gotta get into your head to get you to understand how important it is. When I'm talking to my kids, I always talk about thinking, like you gotta not have surface level thinking. We gotta think beneath the surface, look at things. And sometimes they're telling us stuff without telling us. You know, I'm telling you, look, I am also, if you didn't know, man, I'm totally fascinated by the history of work and how, and the psychology behind work, all right? I am the king of the proletariat. You know what I mean? The prime minister of the proletariat, the leader of the working class. I've done it all right? In order to try to figure this thing out. And at the end, I had to go independent to get some sort of freedom. And, you know, essentially, that's where we're going, man. Hey, this is gonna be like one of those church services where you like, man, this pastor is just talking to me directly. How you know? How you know all that? I don't even know these people. I ain't tell them nothing. So that's what this is gonna be like, all right? One thing is that everybody's accustomed to jobs. The idea of a job, and believe it or not, the concept of a job wasn't even created. You can't even find it in like the first historical reference about a job is in the 1800s. Like not back in the 1500s, not back in the 1800s was when jobs were created. So it's a fairly new concept as far as civilization is concerned, right? The problem with jobs, and of course that was after the Industrial Revolution, and you know, so we started having more and more plants, processing plants, sewing plants, all that kind of. So they developed a system of getting a job. And then of course with Ford, they came in with the hourly wage and all this other stuff. But that's not what we're here to talk about. What we're here to talk about is what that did. The problem is it kind of stripped a lot of people of their skill, right? But back then, even if you didn't have a skill that you used to work with every day, you were still working on your stuff at your house, at your buddy's house. Everybody was still fixing their stuff, and you know, you had plumbers and all that, but they were when it was extremely necessary. But for the most part, everybody was fixing everything themselves, building their own additions, like the whole nine. We had people that understood skilled labor, but the workforce was becoming less skilled. Then you get to the college era, right? Where, hey, you know, you start getting to the 60s and 70s where people started really pushing college heavy. And there's nothing wrong with college and higher education and all that. There's a problem with how much they charge for it. They charge so much for it, and then the kind of jobs you get afterwards, not a lot of them they don't pay. You know, so you got this big bill, and you can't pay. Okay, that's fine. But they also, in order to push people to college, it's one thing they always do, and it really bothers me, is that they train people that if this thing over here is good, then this thing over here has to be bad. They can't just both coexist. It can't be this is just what it is, this is what it is, no. So in order to entice people and push people to go to college, they had to make skilled workers look stupid. Essentially, make them look dirty and dumb. You know what I mean? So it took more of a nosedive as far as skills are concerned. As far as physical skills, right? The issue with college is a lot of the skills you learn, you can't create a business with them. There are some where you can create businesses with them, but it's a lot of them cost a lot of money, and it's a huge task undertaken to start a business up off of what you did in college. So I don't care if you're a business major. Those kind of businesses, they're trying to start up Fortune 500 companies and stuff, or you need a lot of capital invested and all those things, you know. And so if the money's not there, if people are not going to give you the money, you don't have anything, right? But most of them just want to go get a job anyway. So that's what they're taught to do. They just go get a job, right? So a lot of people go to college, their skilled labor level goes down even more. And then in the 80s, when you start getting into the 90s, people even went away from starting to work on their own things. A lot of that is because, you know, people started to work more and more. You know, you go to college, you think the idea that, hey, I'm making all this money. You know, do I want to spend my weekend building an addition every weekend for like the next year? Like, no, why would I do that? Something breaks, Do I want to have to learn how to, I just spent all these years in college. I don't want to have to learn how to fix that thing over there too. And I also went to college for a while. So, hey, I understand the plight of what's going on with college too. I did that. So you don't want to do that, like, so you go to college so you can get away from having to do that, right? That was the agreement. I pay all this money, I get the paper, it says I don't have to do manual labor, right? And plus they told me my whole life manual labor was trash. So I'm done, I don't have to do that. So now we get to the late 90s. We actually switch over from the industrial economic society to a information-based, technology-based society. Right? The whole .com thing, everything, once the internet came out, when technology took over and information age came upon us, that changed the game. So you were no longer, it didn't matter if you went to college, you weren't guaranteed this great job because guess what? There's somebody across the world that went to college too for the same thing, except I could pay them a quarter of the price. And it hurt a lot of people in college. You could ship jobs, you can't ship a skill. So if I got a skill, I can always sell it. Because of that industrial thing, we also get an information and technology age. It made a lot of the plant work obsolete. I remember in the 90s, man, and plants, I mean, you could drive by a plant and the parking lot would be packed like crazy. And you just know all sorts of people that are trying to get in these plants for jobs, right? Now, I mean, I drive by these same plants and parking lots half full, nobody there at night, like it's crazy. And these were jobs that people retired off of at one time, you know what I mean? So where are all these people working? I don't know about your area, but I know in mine, the only thing they're building is restaurants, fast food, and medical facilities. That's it. Ain't no more plants. At least not that I see. Of course, they got warehouses, they got like Amazon, but we already know where that's going, so we don't even have to get into that. I did that too, worked at an Amazon warehouse it was very brief. Let's just say that. So then shoot to the mid to late 2000s where, you had it was 06, the housing market collapse, 08, the banks collapsed. So full recession, but a new economy was emerging. You had the digital economy, but then you also had, they called it the gig economy. Look, people could call it what they want. As far as I'm concerned, the whole gig economy thing was a way of saying, look, you're gonna have to work 2 jobs in order to make it. You know what I mean? But instead of calling it 2 jobs like we used to call it, they called it a side hustle. So that's when they started that term. You gotta get your side hustle. It's just like, what do you mean? It's just another job, right? That's essentially what that was. But over the years, it has evolved where, side hustle is more now considered to be like some kind of independent business or something independent of a job, But when it first started, man, it was just a second job, right? Don't let them fool you. From my vantage point, that's why I say don't just look on the surface, watch what's going on. Sometimes they're just getting you comfortable with things. So yeah, the gig economy started. People have to do ride share and deliver food and all those sort of things, right? But what it's really doing is getting you adjusted to being an independent contractor. And it's taking all the people who didn't have the skill and saying, okay, there's no more plant work. Well, now, if you got a car, you can do this. You can do deliveries. You can do Amazon Flex. You can go do the Walmart thing and take people their packages. And you can do things like this in your own car. It's kind of like what I said back in the day when I used to deliver newspapers. I mean, that's essentially, I was an independent contractor at 11, right? Well, now they're getting everybody ready to be just independent contractors. But if you don't have a skill, you're at the mercy of independent contracting that takes advantage of the average person, okay? And that's who we're talking to, man. I'm not talking to somebody who has a bunch of money. That's not the majority of people. The majority of people out here are just trying to get by. And all they're out here is jobs that are, that are just a struggle fest, 2022. One thing that triggered this for me is like, I was one of those people. 2008 came, I was actually on a full scholarship in college at the time. I was late, it was late, but I was going on a full ride. I was working full time, going to school full time. And I had to come to a point where I had to either quit the job or stay at work. And I had to stay because the economy, the banks fell apart. Then I had to get a second job And I did, like I said it before, I did 2 jobs for like almost a decade. Just try to make ends meet because everything was so stagnant. The thing that kind of pushed me over the edge too, because like I said, I'm sitting back here watching all this like, man, they trying to take us out of these jobs, Then my daughter, my oldest daughter, I don't know, it was somewhere, I don't know, it was probably around 2016, had a job fair. And man, they treated that job fair like it was the 1980s, which it was just telling me they're not preparing the next generation for what's coming. They were still talking about the same jobs, the same plant jobs, and the same stuff that we were talking about in the 80s. And I'm like, this don't exist anymore. Why they still, they're still pushing this stuff on these kids? And that left me a bad taste because it made me feel like my daughters, they're gonna be totally unprepared for what's coming up. And then my experience. Look, there was many reasons why I became a handyman. I did a whole video on it. But a big reason, I feel like they were trying to push people out of the job I was working at, right? I said we didn't get a raise for a decade. Like we didn't get hardly nothing for a decade. Or if they did give us a tiny raise, then the government raised the payroll tax. And then they gave us a tiny raise, and then they raised the medical insurance prices. So it was always broke even. We never were able to get ahead, so I always had to keep a second job, right? Well, they called us all in a meeting and told us, all the people that had my position, called us all in a meeting and said, hey, we know that you guys are underpaid, okay? We know that not just compared to here, compared to the whole nation, y'all are way underpaid, okay? So, it's crazy. The thing is though, the turnover is too low. So they're not gonna approve a raise at the time. I was like, you're telling me we're getting to the point where jobs are telling people that there's not enough people quitting? So they're not gonna give you a raise? I said, I gotta get out of here. Gotta get out of here. So I'm trying to arm people with this understanding that, and even then, the job I was at, like I told you, I was working for the state and it was losing benefits. Slowly but surely, losing this benefit, losing that benefit. I was grandfathered into some. But for the next people coming up, they were getting less and less and less and less. Eventually to the point where it was like, what's the point? What's the point of being here if I just can't make enough money to sustain a living? So that's when I started my mission to leave. And there's a lot of people who are experiencing that, and instead of doing what I did, they'll go and drive Uber, which is nothing wrong with that, because if you can make it work, but it's not a skill, okay? Just don't lie to yourself. Driving Uber is not a skill. Maybe the customer service aspect is a skill, but just driving people in your car, driving strangers in your car ain't a skill, right? Delivering food from the restaurant to somebody's house, it's not a skill. These are all unsustainable over the long term and if you don't have a skill, they can do stuff like, I hear the rideshare people always talking about, oh, they don't pay enough. Well, they don't have to pay you enough, man, because you're just driving food from one place to another. You don't have a skill. They can find any as long as they can find anybody to, I recommend people read. There's a book by Seth Godin called Lynchpin. And it's one of the books, man, I probably read it 4 or 5 times, just as motivation, just because it's about that thing where if we're all artists, right? You're all artists selling your work, right? No matter what you're doing. But if I can just get the guy down the street to do the same thing as what you're doing, and there's the same experience, there's no difference, I don't have to pay you anything. I can just get him to do it. I can get anybody to do it. You don't want to be that person. You want to have something sellable, a sellable skill. I don't care what it is. So this is what I'm talking about. When I say the future, everything is headed towards independent contractors. So if you don't have a skill, you can be an independent contractor driving an Uber, if that's what you want to do. But it doesn't pay enough for you to ever really get ahead. All right? You need a skill. I don't care. I just don't care what it is. I started this YouTube channel. It's not just to make the videos. It's not just to, hopefully grow it into a decent business. It's also to teach my children something else, right? So my youngest daughter will be editing these videos. Well, editing in this new age is a skill that you can sell in the creative age, right? That's where we're headed now. We're headed for creative content, for content creators on all platforms. Editors are needed like crazy now, right? Those are the kind of skills that people need. I mean, you do what you want to do. Just don't say I didn't warn you. Understand, independent contracting is what's coming. I'm gonna sell the handyman business all day. And you know why? Because there's so many parts to it. It's fail-proof. If you learn enough different aspects of the construction or repair or whatever, if one goes down, you just pick up the other one. It's just that simple. You know, that's one reason I added appliance repair a couple years ago. I mean, right now I do it to just make sure I keep my skills up, right? Keep my skills up. But if something ever goes left, I can always go to that full time. You're foolproof. Or you could be standing in the unemployment line with your college degree and no skill. You make the call, man. But I don't want to see it like that. I want you and your kids to win. So I want you to get out of your situation, all right? So even if you don't have to go in full time, you just need to get the skill, all right? Get the skill. You don't got to do it full time. You can stay at your job, right? You can stay at your job and just have the skill. So if something ever happened at your job, you got the skill, you can just bounce, bam, right to something else. You're not sitting there ready to jump off a bridge because you don't know what to do. And nobody's ever told you that you're gonna need a skill. It's coming. So it's gonna come, that time period of having to have a skill is coming whether you like it or not. All right, so like, comment, and subscribe, man. Let's win, it's time to win. Finisher, y'all stay safe and be blessed.